something will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Pascal.
Welcome. It is great to be here. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening, a new radio show on Revolution Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Pasio, and before we get into the topic that we're going to discuss tonight, I want to make a few announcements about how the show is going to work. I want to send some thanks out to people that made this show happen, and I'll give the call-in number. Maybe we'll get to some calls a little bit later. So, this show is going to be broadcast live on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be 2 hours. The second hour is going to be picked up by Revolution Broadcasting and aired on Thursday evening at 8 p.m. Okay, so the show is broadcast live on Tuesdays, 2-hour show. The second hour is going to be picked up by Revolution Broadcasting on Thursday evening at 8. So tune in every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. on Revolution Broadcasting. My website, you can listen live both hours there, is whatonearthishappening.com. That's whatonearthishappening.com. Okay, so I want to send out some thanks to some people for making this show happen. The first person I want to thank is Bob Tuskin from theylie.com. And he was really instrumental in helping me get this show on the air, and an incredible amount of thanks go out to him for all of his help in getting everything set up. I want to also thank Eric G. for introducing me to Bob and basically setting the chain of events in motion that led to me getting the show. So with that in mind, let me give you the call-in numbers, and hopefully we'll get to some callers a little bit later on this evening. The call-in number is 347-884-9417. That's 347-884-9417. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what I do and what we're going to be talking about here tonight. I give a presentation. It's a slideshow presentation and lecture, and it's called What on Earth is Happening. And in it, I basically try to get to the root causal factors of the problems that humanity is experiencing as a species. To strike at the very root of these problems and understand enough about the nature of these problems so that we can basically go to work on solving them. Because ultimately, that's what this is really all about. Many of us have recognized a lot of the problems that humanity faces, but not many of us really understand the causal nature of those problems, the absolute root core factors that are really contributing to those problems, and why we see them manifesting in our how these problems work. You need enough basic information about the nature of the problem. And once you have that, then you can move on to actually implementing solutions. So that's basically what we're going to talk about here tonight. We're going to basically get to the heart, the very heart of the nature of the problems that we encounter as a species and what's really taking place around us in the world. So the first thing I want to talk about, what this entire radio show is ultimately going to be about around us in the world. So the first thing I want to talk about, what this entire radio show is ultimately going to be about around us is what is truth. We have to get down to the fundamental experience suffering in our world. It's completely intermeshed with that idea. Truth, in the way that I look at it throughout my presentation and the way that it's going to be dealt with on this radio program, is essentially nothing more than that which is. That which has actually undergone the process of actually occurring in our reality. Nothing more than that. Events actually take place. They play out in our three-dimensional space-time reality. And that's what I'm calling truth. It isn't the understanding of the mind of God, so to say, or anything extremely esoteric. It's simply events occur. We can understand those events. We can come to an understanding of what is actually taking place, both within us and around us. And really, that is the core reason of why we experience suffering in the world, because we, as a whole, as a collective consciousness, have really gone off the path of truth. We are engaged in illusion. We are engaged in fantasy. We are engaged in fundamental axioms, belief systems that we take as truth, but which fundamentally are not true. And when we basically stay attached to these ideas and core axioms, we suffer as a result if they're not in alignment with what actually is. So let me define what an axiom is, because this is going to be critical as we go forward and talk about concepts like this, to understanding what is really taking place. An axiom is a statement or a proposition that is regarded as already having been established. It's taken as true. It is something that is accepted. It's something that is considered self-evident to most people. Okay? Now, that could be a real problem if what that person takes as self-evident isn't actually what is. And trying to explain to a lot of people, as I'm sure most people who listen to this network understand, is once you start to take ideas to people that aren't in keeping with what they already consider to be true, it's a very difficult barrier to break down between you and the other person that you're trying to explain information to. So we're going to address that. Now, we're going to basically talk about self-knowledge in this program, because that is what we really need to get down to. If we are not to be fooled, if we are not to take deception and falsehood as truth in the world, we have to understand the self and what's going on in human consciousness. So as the introduction said, a big how it works, what the qualities of consciousness are. We're going to talk about how consciousness manifests. We're going to talk about how it has an expression through the physiology. And we'll get into the brain in this program. We'll get into some neuroscience in this program to understanding what's taking place in the world. So to get back to the idea of truth, I want to read a quote by the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard. He said that really there are only two ways that people are ever in the world.
My protective shield.
One
What have you done?
is that they
I destroy all of you for
believe
this.
that which is not true. They accept something that has no basis in actual reality. So they accept ideas or propositions that are not true. The second way that people are fooled is that they refuse to accept that which is true and is actually taking place around them. And Kierkegaard basically said these are the only ways that people are really ever fooled in the world, that they experience manipulation. And I would take this statement even a step further, and I would say that these are really the only two reasons that humanity ever really experiences suffering. Those are the two reasons that humanity experiences suffering. They believe that which is not true, and they refuse to accept that which is true. So that could be another topic of discussion, where we can get a dialogue going about this a little bit later. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is manipulation and deception. Okay? These go to work on us on a daily basis, as many of us know, to basically pull us away from the truth and to get us to not see the truth, get us to not see what is right there in front of our eyes, in plain sight, so to speak. Adolf Hitler, the Supreme Chancellor during the Third Reich in Nazi Germany, he made a statement, and he said, "Make the lie big. Make it simple. Keep saying it, and eventually the people will believe it. Make the lie big. Make it simple. Keep saying it, and eventually you'll get people to accept it." Now think about that. You have to make the lie big. It has to be about something that everyone thinks about, that everyone values in life. It has to be about general concepts that people accept, that people take into themselves, and then base their life upon. Hitler's minister of propaganda during the Third Reich was Paul Joseph Goebbels, and he made a statement that is actually even more sinister than Hitler's. He said, "The bigger the lie, the more it will be believed. The bigger deceivers make the lie, the more people are likely to accept it into their fundamental makeup." Imagine that. And this is true. And we're going to talk about some of these big lies as we move forward on this radio program. And another thing that we're basically going to do is we really want to understand, again, self-knowledge. That's going to be the way out of the mess that we're in. Once we recognize the problems, the solution really lies in understanding who we really are.
We don't know what my brother's doing inside Malacath's shrine.
And the only way you can do that is if you have enough knowledge
Ask your questions.
of
I'm heading
yourself,
to the ruins.
how your
I'll be
own
right back.
consciousness
The
works,
tribes reject
and how to
Malakath.
bring that
Perhaps
consciousness to a
it's
place
true.
of
Malakath's an
balance.
evil.
So I want to read another quote by, this is an inscription that is written on the Oracle of Delphi in Greece from the Greek mystery traditions, schools of consciousness, and people who deeply studied and reflected upon the nature of consciousness itself. Here's the quote. "Heed these words, you who wish to probe the depths of nature. If you do not find within yourself that which you seek, neither will you find it outside of yourself. If you ignore the wonders of your own house, how do you expect to find other wonders? In you is hidden the treasure of treasures. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods." Now this statement reflects a fundamental core truth about the nature of reality that we are embedded in. It says, if you know the self, you will know the universe. So, moving from one reflects knowledge about the other. This says something about the nature of our reality. It says that our reality is self-similar across scales. It is fractal in nature. Okay? It is holographic in nature. Yet within each element, you cut a hologram in half, you don't get half an image. You get a whole image at a slightly lower level of resolution. But nonetheless, the entire image is present. The universe works the same way. If you understand enough about the constituent elements of the universe, meaning the individual consciousness that comprise it, you understand about the whole of nature. So, why do people not understand this principle? Why do they not know the self? Why are we experiencing all the types of problems that we are experiencing based on the fact that people do not understand themselves, that they do not understand the nature of their own consciousness? But moreover, to go back to the fundamental things that people value or accept and how that dictates the quality of their life, if you did this as a social experiment, let's say you went to about 20 or 30 individuals and you asked them, tell me, list the 3 things that you value above everything else in life. Just list the 3 things that you think are the most critical to your life and the quality of your life. Now, I guarantee you would get an extremely diverse amount of answers. They would be all across the board. They would range from family to health to money to possessions to just general religion, general concepts in life. But I would almost guarantee you, I would almost be willing to bet anything on the fact that if you did this social experiment, even with many people around you, you would not get back the answer truth from many people. And this is why we're in the mess that we're in as a whole, as a people. People have lost the idea that truth is valuable, that it means something in relationship to the experience of their lives, that it dictates the quality of that which they experience in their lives. And again, these 2 things are fundamentally interwoven and cannot be separated from each other. When we are in alignment with what is, okay, we are in alignment with what is and what is true.
Well, you're quite
And we
diverse.
speak the truth
I trust
and we
you find
live
a suitable
according
property outside
to
boss.
truth. And by that I mean natural law and moral law. And we're going to talk about those things.
Jean Risa,
Then the quality of our
interesting.
experience
That
improves.
envious
and
hag
we
never
don't
misses an
suffer.
opportunity to stick a thumb in
If,
Felix's
however,
Listen
the
carefully.
nature of our lives
I need you to acquire
varies
that deed as quickly as possible before she
in
makes it
accordance
public
with
that she's bought
what
land
is
for the boss.
truth, then we experience suffering in proportion to the amount that we go off the path of truth. And that is how it works. It really does work like that. That is a fundamental
Use
law
all
of nature.
available means.
And
You can begin by
many
searching
people
the Adex hall
refuse
into
to
the
accept that as a
I will
fundamental
warn you
law
that
of
the
nature.
Adex hall is not open
You know,
to
just like
visitors.
gravity is a law
You'll
of
need to
nature.
be careful while
Doesn't
searching
matter
for the
whether you
deed so as
believe
not
in
to
it.
raise
If
suspicion.
you step off a cliff, you're going to
Jim,
experience the result of what the law of gravity will do to the body. Whether you believe in it or not, it's really kind of irrelevant whether you believe in a natural law, because it's in place and you're bound by it. Now, that could mean you can choose to ignore it, but you're going to suffer proportionally to the amount that you ignore that law. And this is going to lead me into another concept, and I want to bring out the difference between 2 forms of not knowing, because I'm going to talk a lot about natural law and how natural law works throughout this program and programs that we do into the future. We're going to delve into the nature of the problems deeply, and we're going to look into the darkness. Certainly, we're not going to ignore anything that other people consider negative. We will be talking about the core nature of the problem. But I want to address why people largely a formal term for ignorance or general not knowing. It means not knowing. Now, there is a difference between nescience and ignorance. Nescience is not knowing or not understanding something that you wouldn't really be reasonably expected to know or understand. Ignorance is deliberately turning aside from something that you can be reasonably expected to know or understand. Hence the word ignorance. Ignore. You're deliberately choosing not to look at that which is right in front of you, or which is easily able to be understood and taken in by you with a minimal amount of effort. And I would argue that humanity in today's world does not exist in a state of nescience, because there is a profound amount of knowledge in the world. There is an unbelievable amount of information out there on every topic imaginable. Bookstores are full. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of documentaries available out there. People are lecturing places. There's so much, it's almost overkill, the amount of information that is out there. And yet you still have people that just don't want to know. They don't want to look at the truth because of how ugly it has become, because of how much we have descended in consciousness and become something that really humanity probably should never have become, and does not need to stay in this state for really a moment longer. The knowledge is all around us. It's all there. It's a matter of whether we will reach out and take it. And it's also a matter of, once some of us understand the information that is out there, some of us understand the truth, how much will we be willing to fearlessly take it to others around us? How many of us would be really willing to speak the truth into existence and really bring it to other people who need to understand it, whether that may be uncomfortable for us or not? Because it kind of creates sometimes oppositional circumstances between people. And, family members can come to an oppositional relationship when it comes to one person trying to bring information that another person may not necessarily be willing to look at. That's another dynamic that I want to address as we go forward on this radio show. So the next thing I really want to do is, and for probably a good amount of the remainder of this first hour of the show, I want to bring up the concept that in my presentation and on this show I'm going to be referring to as the biggest lie. The biggest lie, okay? There's one lie that is really bigger than any other that is ever told. And it is the most dangerous ideology that basically exists. And this is the ideology. I'm going to tell you what the name of it. There actually is a name for it. I don't give it that name in my presentation, but on the show I want to actually tell you what the name of this ideology is called, because, and we're going to get into it in depth, because this is one of the most fundamental ideologies, believe it or not, in the Western world. And as difficult as that may be for some people to believe, this ideology is so prevalent and it's so insidious that you will find it out there. You have discussions with people who you would least expect to hold this general ideology. You'll find that they believe this and they're unwilling solipsism. Now, many will be hearing this word for the first time because it's not generally talked about as a philosophy or an ideology. So a lot of people don't know what it is. Okay, so I'm going to read a basic definition of what solipsism is and then get into this because this is the biggest lie. This is the main deception that manipulators really use, and they want people to unknowingly and unwittingly accept the philosophy of solipsism, even if it's in the back of their minds. And many people are solipsists and don't even really know it. They don't even really understand that that's the ideology that they subscribe to. And I'll give an anecdote after I get into it a little bit about some solipsists that I have met in my travels and in dealing with some people even in the truth and freedom movements. So what solipsism is it's the philosophical notion that one's own mind is really all that exists and that one's perceptions are equated to reality and truth. Okay? So your perceptions are all that there is. The contents of your mind, your perceptions, that's all that exists. And if you believe that, you might as well turn this show off right now because there's nothing that I or anyone else can really say that could dissuade you from your course. However, this is the biggest lie. There is no more dangerous ideology than the notion that there is no such thing as truth. This is the ideology that is placed out there to dissuade people from ever really going on the journey, from ever really stepping onto the spiritual path in life and the path toward truth. Because if you can convince someone that there really is no truth, that it's all relative, that it's all based on people's perceptions, no matter how erroneous or no matter how totally straying from natural law principles their perceptions may be, then you really have them where you want them to begin to manipulate their sense of reality. That's the biggest lie. And what kind of ideology, before we even get into where this ideology leads, let's look at some of the tenets, the basic tenets
The guards
of
on their way. Best
solipsism.
get out before they clear you out.
Solipsism basically states that there essentially is no reality. There is no actual experiences. It's all just one person's perception. In other words, if my mind ceases to exist, the universe ceases to exist. So nothing really exists to a solipsist. It's all just a fleeting thing in between a time when someone is born and the time that they die. And nothing really matters. And the second tenet is, even
This
if
is your
something
last chance to leave
exists,
before the
you know,
guard
it's
arrives.
basically saying, okay, if tenet number one is somehow miraculously disproven and we can prove that something actually exists, nothing can actually be known about it. So there's no such thing as knowledge. Knowledge doesn't exist.
I called the guards,
to a
and
solipsist.
they're on their way.
Okay? There's no such thing as knowledge. Okay? So there's no truth. That's the first tenet. There's no such thing as the way things are. No truth. There's no such thing as knowledge. In other words, even if you could come to an understanding in your own mind of the way natural law works, even if you could come to an understanding of something in itself, even if you could understand that something exists, you could not really understand anything about it in fullness. And then the third tenet of solipsism is, even if something could be known about anything, okay? You take some kind of natural law, you take some kind of basic principle, you take a thing or an object or a fundamental quality of consciousness, and even if you could get to the truth about any of those things, you could understand something and actually know any information fully about it. You could never actually really communicate that to any other living being. beings.
didn't he?
Now,
He really did it.
this ideology, in my understanding, is about
What do you expect for
as
this?
close to the conception of hell as it
That's
gets.
what you ought to say.
Nothing exists.
I was
Even if
resigned to
something
my
were
fate
to
before you
exist,
showed up.
you could never really know anything about it. And even
didn't
if
ask
you
for it.
take that knowledge and
Away from
communicate
her.
it to
You'll
anyone
ruin
else.
everything.
And what I would say
Up, you
is, this
slavering
is
jackal.
the
You see this?
biggest
Free.
lie. This is the lie that manipulators
I was
really
supposed to
want
free you.
propagated
I was going
to
to
other
take your
people.
hand in marriage.
Because that means they'll never begin the awakening
You
process.
ruined it.
The awakening process
Listen to me,
takes
little
one
slut. Not your
initial
plaything,
leap
never was
of
and
faith.
never will be.
Only
I'd
one.
sooner lie with
One
the maggots
and
than share
only
your
one.
bed.
And that leap of faith is that you
Arranged.
must initially
Mother,
believe
you'll
that
wish
there
you'd
is
never
truth
spurned
to be
me.
found
You
on the
beggar.
journey.
You will
Otherwise, you will never set foot on that
It's
path.
liberating.
If you believe there is no
Don't worry, I
such
know
thing as
these
the
lines
truth,
better than they ever
it
will.
doesn't matter
Thanks
about
again.
anything else that takes place around you, because you will never actually, for yourself, look into anything. If you believe you're not capable of understanding truth, you'll never start looking into it for yourself. And if you buy the third tenet, that even if you were to understand it, you can never really truly communicate it to anyone else, you'll never really begin speaking the truth to anyone else. And that's why this is the most dangerous and insidious ideology on the face of the earth. And it's called solipsism. Remember that word, look into it. And there are more solipsists out there than you would even believe.
Halt.
I know that may be difficult for some people in the type of listening audience that listens here on Revolution Broadcasting and people that come to my site, whatonearthishappening.com. However, that is the case. There are a lot of solipsists out there. And I work with a group in the Philadelphia area called Truth, Freedom, Prosperity. I attend a lot of their meetings. They're activists and they're people who actively are truth seekers and people who are really trying to turn the tide in the dynamic that we're experiencing right now. And even, I go out to some of their meetings, and even some people that come out to hear ideas that are expressed in a group like this, I've heard the notion that there is really no such thing as truth, even in groups like that, which is a disheartening thing to hear in the truth and freedom movements. You would think, why would anybody be out at a group called Truth, Freedom, Prosperity if they believed there was no such thing as truth and it was all about individual perceptions? See, the idea that perception is reality is something that many people really want to propagate and embed in the consciousness of people. But perception is not reality. The quality of our experience is dictated by how closely aligned our perceptions come with truth. And our goal in life needs to be to bring our perceptions into harmony with truth, with that which is. Okay, so we're not constantly engaged in fantasy, so that we're not constantly ignoring that which is going on around us. And more importantly, we're not ignoring that which is going on within us. Because that's really where this is all being driven from. And you're not going to hear me too much talk about the highest level of the control element that's going on. You're not going to hear me get into hatred toward those people who are really up at the highest level of the conspiratorial pyramid, because I don't hold a lot of bitterness or anger toward those people. In a lot of ways, they are united with themselves, at least in a very sick, twisted, and dark way. They're united with themselves. See, they're beings that, as they think, so they feel, and so they act. As twisted as their actions may be, they're still in unity, at least, with this point, a largely easy time at manipulating the rest of us. Because most of us cannot make that same claim. We can't make that same claim, sadly, that as we think, so we feel, and so we act in unison. And there is no contradiction between those three modalities of our consciousness in our lives. Many of us cannot really make that statement. We take actions that we know in the knowledge that we carry and in our emotions, how we feel about it. We know and understand that essentially those actions are not what we should be doing. Yet for whatever reasons or justifications, we take those actions anyway. And that's how we get off the path of truth. And that, again, is why we suffer. And we really can't bring those three aspects of ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions into alignment unless we understand enough about ourselves and how we work. And that's why the manipulators of this world are really so successful. They understand how consciousness works. They understand how natural law works. They understand how the principles of truth work.
I've heard them all
They've
before.
decided
If you
to
pay your
take
bounty, I'll
that
let you walk
knowledge
away.
and use it
Why do
as
I
a
always
weapon
get the ego ones?
against other people that they wish to control and put under their thumb. Because if you can take so much knowledge out of general circulation and you can hide it, you can occult that knowledge. And that's all the word occult means. We'll be talking about a lot about the occult. We'll be talking about different occult systems, different occult ideologies and beliefs, different occult groups as this show progresses over the weeks. All the word occult means hidden. It comes from the Latin. Again, another thing I'm going to be doing a lot on this show is we'll be free-forming ideas, we'll be throwing different concepts out there, but one thing I really am going to be doing a lot is getting into the meaning of words and getting into how words control people. We are controlled through words more than any other methodology. Believe it or not, that's true. The word occult is derived from Latin, and when do this as an experiment. Just play a general word
Hello,
association
Jersey
game with
Blues. I'm good,
Say
man. How are
occult,
you?
and then tell me the first word that comes to your mind when I say that word.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast.
Just 100 times. I guarantee
This
you
is important information. People should listen to it.
the first word that is going to come back in a word association game.
Good morning, Jerry. Oh, here's a phone call. Yes, ma'am.
You still had your pick line in.
Yeah. But I'm pretty... What do I need to do?
I'm not sure. The home health is the one who that usually lets you know when they're coming to take it out. So you haven't heard from them?
No, I mean... My thing was,
almost guaranteed. Try it. This is what manipulators want you to think of as the occult. Okay? All it is knowledge that has been hidden. It comes from the Latin verb occultare. Occultare means to hide or to conceal. That's it. So the word occult is derived from Latin, and all it means is that which is hidden from sight. Nothing more, nothing less. There is no connotation on whether it is for good purposes or for evil purposes. And that's another difference between understanding and wisdom. What is the difference between knowledge and properly applied knowledge? See, to know something, and many people that are listening to this show, and many people throughout the world, have a lot of knowledge. They know a first step. Having knowledge can be helpful, and having knowledge can be useless. Knowledge is simply information. Okay? And what matters isn't necessarily having the knowledge, accurate information about what is. That's knowledge. However, what really makes knowledge important, knowledge in itself isn't power. What you do with what you know really imbues knowledge with power. That's when it becomes actively applied knowledge. And that is done through our actions. Once you know, what are you going to do with what you know? And hopefully this program will be an inspiration for some people to really begin using the most powerful device, the most powerful agency, the most powerful force in the known universe. And that is the power of the human voice. That is the most powerful force in the universe. The voice is the greatest gift that we have ever been given, and it can serve a dual purpose. Because the manipulators of this world, they're using their voice 24/7, and they're using it for deception and manipulation and the propagation of lies, and in particular the biggest lie, that there's no truth, don't even bother going after it. After all, you can't know it. You don't have the ability to really know and understand what is going on and what is taking place around you. And more importantly, they want you to identify with the fact that you can't really know what's going on inside of yourself, in your own consciousness. So, knowledge properly applied in the world, that is what wisdom is. And that's what makes knowledge good or bad. Used for good, to elevate human consciousness, or used for evil purposes, to spread deception and to keep people ignorant and to keep people under control. So, no topics are going to be considered taboo on this show. There is no such thing as negative information. This is where I come to a great divergence with some New Age schools of thought. I'm not a New Age subscriber in this regard, okay? There is no such thing as negative information. As a matter of fact, one of the worst things that I think that we can do is refuse to engage the truth, no matter how ugly it is. If we refuse to look at our own shadow, at the darkness that dwells in our own individual consciousnesses and in our own hearts, then we're really not going to get very far on the journey that we're on, and we're not really going to get to the heart of the matter. We have to be willing to look The way out of this uncomfortable situation is to go through it. Not around it, not under it, not over it, not turning your back and walking in the other direction. It doesn't work like that. The way out is to go through the problems that we've created by confronting them. And the only way to do that is to look at oneself. The answer lies in the mirror, and that's going to be the focus of what this show is really ultimately all about. This show is going to be a process of self-examination above all else. Self-examination. The more self-knowledge we have about how we work and why we fundamentally believe the things that we do and why we fundamentally behave in the ways that we do. Until we have enough information about that, you really aren't in a position to start affecting things for the better and moving it toward the solution. There does have to come knowledge first. Otherwise, we'd be running around like chickens with our heads cut off, not really knowing what's going on, not really knowing what's going on within us, most importantly. So let's further break some of these ideas down and let's get into what human consciousness really is ultimately about. We have a threefold nature to our consciousness. Maybe it would help first, let's talk about what consciousness is. Consciousness is really the solution to the problems that we face. It's the solution for not being deceived anymore. It's the solution for not being able to be externally controlled by other people anymore. Consciousness is the solution to ultimately all the problems that we face as a species. Because if we don't have consciousness, we're wandering in the dark. We are wandering in base levels of awareness. You never really know the difference between truth and falsehood if you're at a low vibrational consciousness. You know, somebody can come along with any lie or any made-up notion, and they can hold it out there as bait, and you'd be willing to bite it and buy it. You know, again, it has been said, are we really being sold the lies that we're living according to? Were we really sold them? Or did we buy them willingly? That's a question we all really need to ask ourselves. Were we so hungry for someone to take responsibility for us, for someone to think for us, for someone to solve problems for us, that we were willing to lay aside our personal responsibility and most of all our responsibility to understanding the truth? Were we willing to lay that aside and just say, okay, I'll take your solution. All you have to do is put it out there, and I accept. I'll buy it. I think the latter is certainly the case. That we really weren't sold the mess that we're in. We bought it hook, line, and sinker. And the only way to really get out of that modality of being in the world is to raise consciousness. That's what the solution ultimately is. Every problem contains in itself the seed of its own solution. And that seed is human consciousness. Now, consciousness, how I'm going to use it, and again, not just tonight, but throughout the entire show, the definition that I'm going to use for consciousness, when I say consciousness, what I'm talking about is it's our ability to recognize patterns that are going on with respect to the events that are taking place around us. And not just around us, but also inside of us. You know, the internal patterns that take place within the body, within the mind, within our feelings. That's what consciousness is about, being able to recognize patterns and meaning. What do those patterns mean? Not just that they are there, but then why are they there? The question why has to be addressed all the time. That's what consciousness really is. It's looking at something and it's asking the question why. Why is it like this? Why is this the fundamental nature of this thing or this problem or this event? So consciousness is our ability to recognize patterns and meaning with respect to the events that are taking place both within us and around us. That's all I'm really referring to when I refer to human consciousness. And consciousness can either be raised through knowledge or it can be manipulated through knowledge. And that is what we're going to really get into when we start getting into occult methodologies for controlling consciousness. And that's, by any name that you give it, that is mind control. And that's going to be one of the central focuses of this show as we move forward. I'm going to talk about mind control and its methodologies. Because if someone doesn't understand the methodologies of mind control, they don't really have the tools to understand the ways that they may be actively being manipulated by other people who do not have their best intentions at heart. So we have to know the methodologies of mind control. And mind control works on multiple fronts. There's so many different methodologies of it. There are, and I'm largely talking about mass mind control. There's something called trauma-based mind control, which we're probably going to do a full show on. However, what I'm largely talking about is mass mind control. Mind control that goes to work on large populations of people based on programming into them the fundamental axioms, the core belief systems that people fundamentally take as true and then act upon as if they are true. That's what mind control is. And we have to be aware of how it works. And again, it's a multifaceted set of techniques. That's what mind control is. It works through very, very powerfully through words. So understanding the words that we speak, understanding language is a huge part of mind control. I don't know whether anyone is familiar with something called neuro-linguistic programming, which is about word choice and speech patterns.
I can only stream for an hour on here, so I'll put the rest of this on the next video.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the use of symbolism. It is a language that if we don't understand the building blocks of and the syntax of, then we are completely vulnerable to its manipulation at a subconscious level. So we'll be getting into symbolism a lot on this program. We'll be talking about frequency, the use of colors, and we'll be getting into the use of shapes and forms, and how all of these come together in a cohesive way and are used to influence the thoughts and ultimately be used as a mechanism to subvert consciousness and control it. It really is, it's more than mind control. It's consciousness control is what the human species is basically under. It is the manipulation and control of the three forms, the three experiential forms of human consciousness, which we're going to get into in a few moments. So I wanted to do a couple of things. The first hour is going to be winding down soon. I want to give out again the call-in number for this program and encourage people to call in during the second hour. I basically largely laid out a lot of concepts during this first hour in a short amount of time. So let's have some callers call in on the call-in line, and let's take some calls in the second hour if we can. The number to call in is 347-884-9417. So go ahead and start calling that, and I'll take some calls during the second hour of the broadcast tonight. The number again is 347-884-9417. My website is whatonearthishappening.com, and again, this show is going to be live on Tuesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be live on revolutionbroadcasting.com for the first hour. The second hour feed will be picked up by Revolution Broadcasting, and it will be broadcast on Thursday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So, let's wrap up the show with the first hour of the show with an explanation of the two basic ways that consciousness breaks down and manifests. And essentially, these are in an internal feminine manifestation and in an external masculine manifestation. So I'll say that one more time. Consciousness, there is essentially two seemingly opposite qualities. However, they are really not opposites. They are really unified, and they dance with each other is a good way to look at it, okay? They're actually embraced, and they form the whole, the quality of the whole of consciousness. There's an internal, an indwelling feminine manifestation, and then there is an external masculine manifestation of consciousness. Now, different spiritual systems have given these different names, okay? For example, you can look in Taoism, and in Taoism, they're called yin and yang, okay? Yin is the internal feminine. It's a passive quality. It's an intuitive quality. It is more compassionate or submissive, and it is associated with